Untouchable. That's the perfect way to describe both Satoru Gojo and Giorno Giovanna. It's the reason these two sneak their way into so many power scaling debates. Who cares if All Might can level a city with one of his punches? He can't ever touch Gojo, right? And what's a couple moon-busting feats from Naruto if all his attacks are returned to zero by Giorno? That is why today's question is so exciting. And by the way, I promise that this won't end in a stalemate. So, don't worry, anime onlys, I will give ample warning when I discuss manga spoilers for both JJK and JoJo. So as long as you're caught up on the anime, you will be able to understand everything I discuss here. But enough of the intro, hit the like button, subscribe, strap in. We are about to see an unstoppable force meet an immovable object. Giorno Giovanna is the son of Dio Brando, who hijacked the body of Jonathan Joestar. He carries the blood of both brothers and displays both their gentle strength and ruthless cunning. He's a stand user. His soul has evolved to have a semi-physical representation that can leave his body and act on his will. Gold Experience. Gold Experience's abilities are actually some of the most diverse and unique of all 9 JoJos so far. The primary power is life-giving. When Giorno touches an inanimate object, he can imbue it with life energy, transforming it into a living creature. He can turn a rock into a frog, a lighter into a flower, a helicopter into a tree. Any creature he has knowledge of, he can transform matter into it. The animals will generally act accordingly to their own wills, but he can direct or position them to fight on his behalf. The second major effect of the life-giving ability is damage reversal. When Giorno creates life, that life form cannot be damaged through malice. If a person attacks one of his creations, that damage will be redirected back onto them. When Leaky Eye Luca smacked Giorno's frog, the damage returned to himself, caving his own skull in. The third effect of life-giving is what happens when Giorno uses it on an already living creature. That person or animal will be supercharged with life energy, and their mind will be accelerated to the point where time appears to slow down. They exist in an out-of-body state, where they are completely helpless, only able to watch as their body is ragdolled without their influence. This effect wears off after a short time. Giorno can also use his ability to create pieces of living creatures, missing limbs, chunks of flesh, and even entire organs like a missing eyeball, which can be attached to an injured area to effectively skip the natural healing process. But this way of healing is both slow and painful. Gold Experience is strong and versatile, but it's nowhere near enough to stack up against the likes of Gojo. That only happens once Giorno's stand is pierced with the stand arrow, and evolves again into the nigh-invincible Gold Experience Requiem. GER is significantly stronger and faster than Gold Experience, and it passively grants Gojo the power of flight. But its primary ability is what makes it stand out from the pack as the strongest combat stand seen in the anime so far. Return to Zero. GER harnesses the fundamental concept of zero and uses it as a passive defense against all potential danger. Anyone that moves against Giorno while GER is active will have their actions undone, and all their progress returned back to the start. It doesn't matter if the attack lands or if Giorno is damaged. Not only will the enemy's actions be undone, but so will any and all effects on Giorno. It's a stand you cannot move against, because all of your efforts will be unwound back to where they began. And interestingly, Giorno himself doesn't need to see the attack coming. GER has its own consciousness that acts autonomously, and can even see during Diavolo's skipped time. Finally, GER has a unique subsequent ability, a riff on the way life-giving expands the consciousness of a sentient creature it's used on. When GER kills you, it returns your experience of death to zero, meaning that you will repeatedly experience death over and over again through infinite different scenarios for all of eternity. Brutal. But this doesn't mean GER just beats anyone ever, right? That would be a no-limits fallacy. We know that in Part 6, because Pucci's plan succeeded, GER wasn't able to stop the Heaven Plan from the other side of the planet. GER is not an omniscient being, and it has limited range of both visibility and effect. And even though it would have been badass for Giorno to return Maiden Heaven back into White Snake That would have kind of ruined the plot and themes of Stone Ocean, but that's not the point of this video. Theoretically, if Giorno is completely killed in a fast enough strike, GER would disappear before it had the chance to rewind the attack to 0, theoretically. Satoru Gojo is the sole wielder of both the 6 Eyes and the Limitless technique, the hereditary treasure of the Gojo clan. He's a Jujutsu sorcerer and the pinnacle of power amongst the world of curses and curse users. Due to these extremely rare overlapping abilities, the 6 Eyes allow his mind to properly perceive and calculate all necessary variables to use the full extent of Limitless, the power of infinity. As a Jujutsu sorcerer, Gojo can regulate and focus the energy of his negative emotions, using that power to strengthen his body and strike with superhuman force against enemies both human and curse. His Limitless ability harnesses the concept of infinity, which can be channeled through various different techniques. The neutral technique of infinity is a passive defense. When attacks approach Gojo, they instead reach the convergence of an infinite series, never making their way to him. Infinity keeps any and all attacks away, as Gojo has perfected the ability to the point that it can detect the makeup and speed of incoming objects and discriminate against dangerous ones. The mastery over space that Limitless provides also allows Gojo to fly, levitate, and teleport. By focusing the power of infinity, Gojo can cast Lapse, Blue. This curse technique produces a vacuum, sucking in matter and condensing it infinitely, with enough power to tear apart buildings and rip up the ground in giant swaths. When Gojo multiplies his negative cursed energy against itself, it produces reverse cursed energy, essentially positive energy. This can be used to heal the body and mind, and because of Limitless, Gojo has an unending supply of cursed energy. Combine this with his ability to convert to reverse cursed energy, and he can constantly refresh his mind, keeping his Limitless barrier active at all times without any need to rest. Another application is when Gojo applies his reverse curse technique in concentrated bursts like Blue. It produces Red. This divergence of infinity releases a repelling force with twice the power of Blue. And of course, his ace in the hole is the closely guarded secret of the Gojo clan, Imaginary Technique Purple. By simultaneously casting both red and blue and then colliding them together, he creates a gigantic imaginary mass that deletes everything it touches right out of reality. And finally, the greatest Jujutsu sorcerers who have the strongest sense of self are able to express the essence of their soul inside a controlled environment, generating a space in which they are significantly more powerful. Domain expansion. Gojo's domain is Unlimited Void, a metaphysical space that overloads the minds of those inside with an infinite string of information, rendering them completely helpless as their body freezes in place. Nervous system is unable to process it all. Any normal person would be made brain dead for life after just a minute inside Unlimited Void, and even supernatural entities like curses are overwhelmed and immobile for a brief period after experiencing it. Now, like Giorno, Gojo isn't completely invincible. His infinity has been circumvented by Toji Fushiguro using the inverted Spear of Heaven, which neutralizes all cursed energy. As such, it's likely he could be made defenseless against any magic that focused on neutralizing his cursed abilities. Also, in extremely rare instances where he's emotionally overwhelmed, he is susceptible to mental attack. This is how he was trapped inside the prison realm cube by the disaster curses. Finally, one of the effects of a domain is that it produces a sure hit effect. Theoretically, if Gojo was trapped inside someone else's domain and wasn't able to open his own domain to counter it, he would be damaged by any attack thrown against him there, even with his infinity up. So, with two virtually untouchable titans, what does this fight actually look like? First, we need to get something important squared away. Stands and curses function very similarly. They're both supernatural powers that serve as expressions of the user's soul. And only stand users can see stands, while Jujutsu sorcerers are the only ones that can see curses. That said, I don't think the two are exactly equivalent. Stands are literally your soul as an evolved form, while curses are just negative emotional energy given form that happens to be shaped by the soul. So, I'm confident that a stand user could see curses in cursed energy, because they can see all manner of soul nonsense. Think to part 4, they could just see ghosts, right? On the flip side, curse users may not be able to see stands since they're not explicitly negative emotional energy. But Gojo can probably see stands, including GER, with his 6 eyes, because the 6 eyes can see just about anything. So going into this fight, I believe both Gojo and Giorno will be able to see each other's abilities. With that out of the way, even though stands can be incorporeal when they want, normal punches and kicks from GER are not getting through Gojo's neutral infinity. His barrier stops both physical matter and spiritual entities like Jogo and Hanami. On top of that, attacks from animals that GER creates won't pierce through infinity either. It doesn't matter who is attacking him or from what direction. If it tries to approach Gojo, then infinity will stop it. Even if Giorno is clever and uses something like a snake or maybe a beetle that sprays a venom into the air to create a cloud of toxic gas, Gojo has specifically trained Limitless to recognize poisons and prevent them from getting close. Now, just as a hypothetical, let's say that Giorno manages to touch Gojo somehow, even briefly, and hit him with his life-giving ability, accelerating his senses. This actually wouldn't bother Gojo, because the 6 Eyes' primary function is to process enormous amounts of information. He would simply understand everything that's happening and just react like normal. Giorno's best chance is probably to create several dangerous animals between himself and Gojo. It's very likely that Gojo will kill some of these animals, and then the damage reflection will return to him. But his reverse curse technique is ridiculously strong. He regenerated from the multiple fatal wounds Toji left him with, and that was his very first time doing it. He was even stabbed in the brain. Now, is it possible that GER could return Gojo's healing to 0 on doing it? Yes, but because of Limitless, Gojo has limitless reverse cursed energy to heal himself with over and over. So this particular scenario would end in a stalemate. Gojo constantly healing himself and Giorno constantly undoing it in a loop forever. As for Gojo's means of offense, any melee attacks he throws at Giorno are just going to be undone, whether they hit or not. Believe it or not, if they do hit, Gojo has a way of winning. Yes, GER can act without Giorno's knowledge, but at the end of the day, it's still a stand, and it's still linked to Giorno's soul. If Gojo could theoretically kill Giorno in a single, overwhelming strike faster than GER can perceive, then it would disappear before it has the opportunity to return the attack to 0. He could get speed blitzed. So, we need to see who's faster. The easiest way to scale the speed of Gold Experience Requiem is by the fact that when it first appeared, it moved faster than King Crimson could perceive. This is the same King Crimson who easily outpaced Polnareff's Silver Chariot, which moves with at least relativistic speeds, judging by how he tagged the Lightspeed Hanged Man. If Silver Chariot is moving at speeds relative to light, and he's slower than King Crimson, who himself is slower than GER, that means Giorno is probably moving with GER at light speed or faster, at a minimum. As for Gojo, we know he can teleport, which is technically instantaneous movement, but it's not something he can do in the heat of battle, at least he never has. Instead, we need to judge his typical reaction and movement speeds, which are a lot lower. We can scale him against Toji, who moves at least the speed of sound as he runs on water, and he's also stated as the fastest sorcerer of the modern era, which means he's faster than Naobito Zenin, the sorcerer from Shibuya that harnessed the power of individual frames. And we know that Gojo can cheat, utilizing blue to manipulate space and launch himself around faster than he would be able to normally, but this isn't such a speed buff that it makes him in a different league or something. Even assuming it doubles his speed, which would be a big stretch, Unfortunately for Gojo, that's where he taps out. Even if we were to highball him up to massively hypersonic, which is way faster than anyone in Jujutsu Kaisen, that is still nowhere near the speed of light. It is extremely unlikely that he is landing an attack on Giorno and killing him before GER has a chance to react. The most probable scenario is that GER sees an incoming attack, red or blue, and then returns it to 0 before it can reach Giorno. Alright, so what if GER loses its ability to return things to 0 because its mind is overloaded? What if Gojo opens up his domain? First things first, Unlimited Void would absolutely incapacitate Giorno. But we know that GER acts outside of Giorno's perception, and it can see and even react inside Diavolo's hyperdimensional time space. It's literally perceiving and reacting to hyper time, an entire dimensional tier of infinity above Gojo's. So if Gojo opens up his domain and completely overwhelms Giorno's mind, GER will not care. It will not bother it. It will simply unexpand the domain and return infinity to 0. Domain expansion doesn't work either. Before I get into how this fight really ends, I have one last sidebar. I want to address one last idea, even if it's a little silly. Could the stand arrow pierce Gojo's infinity? It is a physical object that's able to pierce stands. It tends to completely ignore durability and be drawn towards powerful souls. On top of all of that, it kind of reminds me of the inverted Spear of Heaven. It is a broken ancient relic we really don't know much about that mostly serves plot purposes but would look sick as hell if it was hanging up on my office wall. If I were writing this fight as an episode of an anime, I would absolutely have the arrow be able to pierce infinity, and it would end up giving Gojo a stand. Artists, get on that stat. But anyway, ultimately it's something we can only speculate on, so it would be unhelpful to consider it for this battle, and we're going to disregard it. So moving on, it's about time I tell you the actual trump card that actually has an effect in this battle. Hollow Purple. Yes, it's true that purple is both faster and more destructive than red or blue, but that is not the reason why it's so important here. In the JoJo video game, Eyes of Heaven, an alternate universe version of Dio defeats Jotaro and then goes on to complete the Heaven plan outlined by Pucci in Stone Ocean. In doing so, his stand becomes the world over Heaven, which has the ability to rewrite reality. We actually see during a cutscene that Giorno attempts to fight this Dio with GER, but Dio's new power is explicitly beyond reality. He can overwrite it. GER is not able to return his attacks to 0 and is defeated. Now I'm going to touch on something from part 8, so anime onlys skip to this timestamp on the screen to avoid manga spoilers. Gone? Alright, so in the finale of JoJolion, we see Gappy has come up against an unbeatable foe, the rock human Toru. His stand, Wonder of You, is invincible because any movement or attack made against it is met with calamity that devastates the attacker. It is a hard and fast rule, just like how GER's return to 0 works. But as it turns out, Gappy is a sort of divine being. He was born from 2 stand users, who then partook in the Rokakaka fruit and were buried under the Wall Eyes, an earthly manifestation of holy power. It's actually why the part is named JoJolion. It is a pun on Evangelion. Part 8 is the Gospel of JoJo, the story of how an evolved being came about. And that evolved being, Josuke, gains his true ability at the end. Soft and Wet, Go Beyond. Go Beyond launches an attack that exists purely metaphysically. It does not actually exist in the world. These bubbles are invisible, but are able to damage Wonder of You without bringing calamity back to Josuke. They completely bypass durability and even logic because they don't exist. They are described as a void of nothingness that passes through anything, hollowing it out. Hollow. Sound familiar? Alright, no more manga spoilers from this point forward. My basic point is, Hollow Purple creates an imaginary mass, mass that does not exist in reality. And we know that in the world of JoJo, the most powerful stands are only defeated by forces that originate from outside reality, ignoring their logic and rules. Because it is not a part of reality, Hollow Purple should bypass the rule of return to zero. The initial attack and any damage done by Hollow Purple cannot be undone by GER. So what this battle boils down to at the end of the day is Gojo and Giorno repeatedly attempting to attack one another. Their strikes either never reaching their target or undone right after they land. This continues until Gojo launches a Hollow Purple. Either GER reacts and Giorno dodges out of the way, returning them to a stalemate, or he chooses to return the attack to zero as it flies at him, discovering too late that he can't, as he's erased from this world by an attack that exists outside of it. Only one of these two characters with a single win condition is Satoru Gojo. Even if he only wins 1 out of every 10 fights, the other 9 are always a stalemate. The winner is Gojo. Stay frosty.